Lyra was known across the Union fleet as one of the finest pilots. She was not the fastest, nor was she the strongest, but she had something no one else had. She had a bond with her partner, Oran. Oran was an alien warrior from a distant world, tall and proud, his voice calm even in the middle of battle. He was more than just a soldier to Lyra. He was her anchor, the one who kept her steady when the stars burned with fire. The two of them had flown together for years. Their ship, the Silver Wing, was a small fighter compared to the massive war cruisers of the fleet, but in their hands it became something greater. Lyra was the pilot, sharp-eyed and quick, and Oran was the gunner, his steady aim making every shot count. Together, they formed a team that others admired and enemies feared. They had survived raids, blockades, and ambushes. They had crossed battle lines and returned when others thought they were lost. Every victory added another layer to the trust between them. Lyra never doubted Oran. He never doubted her. When he spoke, she listened. When she acted, he followed without hesitation. But all bonds, no matter how strong, can be broken in war. The mission had seemed simple that day. They were to escort a supply convoy to a colony on the edge of Union space. Raiders had been reported in the region, but nothing unusual. The convoy was lightly armed, and the Silver Wing was placed at the front as a shield. Lyra sat in the pilot's seat, fingers dancing over the controls, while Oran sat behind her, checking the weapons systems. "Stay sharp," Oran said in his deep steady voice. Lyra smiled faintly, eyes on the stars. "I always am." At first, the journey was quiet. The convoy drifted like a line of stars across the darkness, each ship holding food, medicine, and tools for the settlers waiting far ahead. Lyra relaxed a little, though Oran never did. He was watching the scanner when the warning came. "Raiders incoming. Right flank." The screen lit up with red dots as enemy ships dropped from warp. Their engines flared like hungry fire, and their weapons locked on the convoy. Without hesitation, Lyra pulled the Silver Wing into action. Oran opened fire, his shots cutting across the void, striking the first wave. The battle began. Enemy ships swarmed like insects, fast and reckless. Lyra's hands moved quick over the controls, spinning the fighter through fire and smoke. Oran's aim was perfect, dropping raider after raider. But there were too many. The convoy cried out for help as blasts tore into their hulls. Lyra pushed harder, weaving through the chaos, doing everything she could to shield them. Then it happened. A raider dove straight for the convoy's lead ship. Lyra swung the Silver Wing into its path, but another enemy cut across from the side. A blast struck the fighter, and alarms screamed inside the cockpit. Smoke filled the air, sparks bursting from the panels. Lyra fought to hold the ship steady. "Oran, status," she called, coughing through the smoke. There was silence for a heartbeat too long. Then his voice came, rough but steady. "I'm hit." Her heart froze. She turned her head just enough to see him. Oran was slumped in his seat, smoke curling around him, blood seeping through the cracks in his armor. His hands still gripped the controls of the turret, but his strength was fading. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "Stay with me. We're not done." Oran's eyes met hers for a brief moment. In them she saw no fear, only calm acceptance. "Protect the convoy. That is the mission." Her hands shook on the controls. "Not without you. I can't." "You can," he said, his voice low but firm. "You always could." Another blast rocked the ship. Oran turned his focus back to the weapons, forcing his arms to move. He fired one last volley, cutting down a raider that had locked on the convoy. His aim never faltered. But then his hand slipped from the controls. His head bowed forward, and the light in his eyes dimmed. Lyra screamed his name, but there was no answer. Oran was gone. For a moment, the universe seemed empty. She wanted to stop, to give in, to let the darkness swallow her. But the alarm still screamed, and the convoy still needed her. Through the fog of grief, she forced herself to act. Her hands steadied, her eyes sharpened. She became steel. The silver wing moved with fire. She dodged blasts, cut across enemy lines, and struck back with everything the ship had left. Alone now, she fought for both herself and the partner who had fallen. By the time Union reinforcements arrived, the convoy was still standing. The raiders were broken, fleeing into the stars. The victory meant nothing to her. When the battle ended, and the convoy was safe, she landed the damaged fighter on the nearest station. The medics rushed in, but it was too late. They covered Oren's body with a cloth, and Lyra stood in silence, her hands trembling. She felt hollow, like part of her had been torn away. For years, she had fought side by side with him. He was her shield, her friend, her brother in arms. Now, the seat behind her was empty. The silver wing would never feel the same again. That night, as she sat alone in the quiet hangar, she stared at the fighter and remembered Oren's last words. Protect the convoy. That is the mission. She hated those words because they meant leaving him behind. She hated the war that had taken him. Most of all, she hated the thought that someone else might sit in his place. To her, there was no replacement for Oran. There never would be. Days passed after the battle, but to Lyra, time moved like heavy chains. The hangar felt empty each time she stepped inside. The silver wing stood ready, but the seat behind her remained cold and silent. She would walk past the rows of ships, hearing the voices of other crews, pairs, and teams laughing or trading stories. Their voices only reminded her of the silence that followed her everywhere. The Union fleet could not let a fighter go unused. The command board called her in not long after Oren's burial. The meeting room was bright, its white walls clean and polished, but Lyra felt like she was being dragged into a storm. A senior officer, calm and strict, looked at her. Pilot Lyra. The fleet recognizes your service. We also recognize your loss. But the war does not pause for grief. You will continue your duty. A new partner has been assigned to you. The words struck her harder than enemy fire. A new partner. To her, those words sounded like betrayal. Oren's place was not empty by chance. It was sacred. Replacing him felt like erasing him. Lyra's jaw tightened. She wanted to protest, but her voice refused to rise. The officer continued without pause. His name is Merak. He is human, trained in tactical gunnery and survival. He will join you aboard the Silver Wing. Effective immediately. Human. The word only deepened her bitterness. She had fought beside many species in the fleet, each with their own strengths. But humans were new to the outer wars. They were small in number and often untested. To place one beside her after losing Oran felt like an insult. When the meeting ended, Lyra walked out without a word. She wanted to be alone, but fate had no patience. She met Merak for the first time in the hangar. He was waiting by the Silver Wing, dressed in standard fleet armor, helmet under his arm. His frame was lean, his face quiet and plain. He did not stand tall like Oran, nor carry the heavy presence of a warrior. Instead, he looked almost ordinary, as if he belonged on a colony farm rather than a battlefield. "Pilot Lyra," he said, giving a respectful nod. His voice was calm, steady, with no sign of pride. She did not return the nod. She only walked past him, placing her hand on the side of the fighter. "Stay out of my way," she said coldly. Marek did not reply. He only climbed into the gunner's seat as if her words were nothing new. Their first mission together came quickly. A patrol along the borders of Union space, a task that should have been simple. Lyra sat in the pilot's chair, her hands steady on the controls, while Marek settled behind her. The silence between them was sharp. In the past, Oran would have filled that silence with calm advice or sharp warnings. Marek said nothing. He only studied the systems and kept his focus. Hours passed with nothing but the hum of the engines. Lyra wanted to hate him, wanted to prove that he was weak, but there was nothing to see. He was simply present, quiet and steady. Then, a signal broke the silence. An unidentified vessel approached from the edge of the system. Lyra's eyes narrowed as she moved the silver wing to intercept. The ship ahead was a raider scout. The enemy turned its guns on them at once, firing bright streaks of light across the void. Lyra dodged the first volley, hands moving with skill. The scout was fast, weaving and darting, but she was faster. She spun the fighter into the chase, waiting for Marek to act. "Target locked," Marek said calmly, his voice even, not shaken by the sudden fire. The guns roared, and the scout ship's shields sparked under the strike. The enemy tried to return fire, but Marek was quick. His aim was sharp, his shots falling with precision until the raider broke and fled into warp. The danger was over in moments. Lyra kept her eyes on the stars, her jaw clenched. She wanted to ignore the fact that Marek had done well. She wanted to believe it was luck. She refused to speak a word of thanks. Marek said nothing either. He only checked the systems, reported the fighter's status, and waited for her orders. The next missions were the same. Small patrols, convoy escorts, skirmishes with raider scouts. Lyra flew with unmatched skill, while Marek handled the weapons with quiet precision. He did not miss often, and when he did, he corrected quickly. He never raised his voice, never questioned her decisions, and never tried to push himself forward. Still, she gave him no credit. In her mind, every strike he made only reminded her of the strikes Oran had once made. Every calm word he spoke only reminded her of the voice she had lost. She could not accept him, not when the seat he filled was meant for someone else. Crew members across the fleet began to whisper. They noticed the silence between pilot and gunner. They noticed how Lyra walked ahead, never looking back, while Marek followed without complaint. They said the bond was broken before it began, and that the Silver Wing would never fight as it once had. Lyra heard the whispers but ignored them. She told herself she did not care. What mattered was flying, keeping the missions complete, and holding the memory of Oran untouched. She would not let anyone take that from her. But deep within, she knew the truth. The war was not slowing. Missions would grow harder. And whether she wanted to accept it or not, Marek was now her partner. Still, her heart refused to yield. She hated the thought that this quiet human might one day stand where Oran once stood. She hated that command believed he was worthy. She hated that his silence gave her no excuse to push him away. The Silver Wing flew on through the stars, the space between its pilot and gunner colder than the void outside. Yet in that silence, Marek never faltered. He did not ask for her trust. He did not push for her respect. He simply did his duty, waiting with patience as if he knew that the storm around Lyra's heart would one day change. The days turned into weeks, and the war did not slow. The Union fleet sent the Silver Wing from one mission to the next, always moving, always fighting. Lyra sat in the pilot's chair with her eyes sharp on the stars, and Marek sat behind her in the gunner's seat, silent as ever. At first, Lyra thought she could ignore him. She told herself he was just another soldier filling space. But on every mission, his presence pressed against her thoughts. He was steady, too steady, and his silence left no place for her anger to land. Their patrols crossed the edges of Union territory, where raiders struck like wolves against weak targets. Often, they were called to protect small mining stations or guide fragile transports. The missions were never easy, but with Oran she had faced worse and come back alive. With Marek, the work felt colder. The Silver Wing moved through space like a shadow. Lyra flew with skill, weaving the fighter between blasts of fire, engines burning bright. Marek worked the weapons with calm precision, never missing a chance to strike. On the surface, they looked like a strong team. But beneath the surface, there was nothing. No trust, no warmth, no bond. Only cold silence. The other crews noticed it. In the hangar, whispers followed them. The pilot flies like fire, but she will not speak to her gunner. The human sits behind her, yet she treats him like air. They fight well, but they are broken inside. Lyra heard these words but pushed them aside. To her, the truth was simple. Marek was not Oran. He never would be. Every mission was only a reminder of what she had lost. One mission brought them to a colony world under attack. Raiders had slipped through the defenses and were burning supply depots on the surface. The Silver Wing was ordered to strike fast and clear a landing zone for reinforcements. The fighter roared through the clouds, engines glowing as Lyra dropped them low over the colony fields. Fire spread across the horizon, smoke rising into the sky. Raiders swarmed below with stolen weapons, shooting at anything that moved. "Targets ahead," Marek said in his quiet voice. Lyra ignored his words, already diving the fighter into position. The guns thundered as Marek fired, striking raider trucks and tearing through their lines. His aim was sharp, cutting a path through the chaos. Lyra kept the ship moving fast, low enough to draw fire but swift enough to dodge it. Together, they drove the enemy back. When the colony troops arrived, the raiders were already broken, running for cover. The landing zone was clear, and the mission was a success. The colony cheered for the Silver Wing, but Lyra felt nothing. She returned the fighter to orbit, silent as always. That night, as the crews rested in the hangar, a fellow pilot approached her. He was a short alien with bright silver eyes, known for his quick jokes. "You and the human make a strong pair," he said with a grin. Lyra glared at him. "We are not a pair." The pilot raised his brows. "He shoots well. He follows orders. The two of you save lives. What more is needed?" Lyra turned away without answering. She did not want to hear praise for Marek. She did not want others to believe he belonged in Oran's place. But deep inside, her mind whispered a truth she hated to face. Marek did shoot well. He did follow orders. He did save lives. The missions were cold, but they were not failures. Another mission came soon after. This time, the Silver Wing escorted a convoy through a region heavy with raider activity. The flight was long, the stars endless. Hours passed with nothing but silence inside the cockpit. Lyra stared ahead, her hands steady, but her thoughts restless. At last, Marek spoke. "You are flying too close to the lead ship. If we are attacked, you will not have space to dodge. His tone was calm, not sharp, but it struck her nerves. She snapped back, I know how to fly. Do not tell me my work. He did not argue. He only adjusted the targeting systems and fell silent again. The quiet returned, heavier than before. Minutes later, raiders appeared from the dark, firing on the convoy. Lyra's ship jolted as she swerved, but Marek had already locked on the attackers. His guns lit up the stars, striking the raiders before they could break the convoy line. When the danger passed, Lyra's jaw clenched. She knew his warning had been right. She had flown too close. But pride chained her tongue. She said nothing, only pushed the fighter back into formation. This became the pattern of their missions. She ignored his advice, but his actions saved them again and again. Twice he noticed ambushes on the scanner before she did. Once he caught a malfunction in the weapons system that could have left them defenseless. Each time, he said nothing more than the facts, no anger, no pride. Each time, she refused to thank him. The silence between them grew colder with every mission. Yet despite it, the Silver Wing continued to succeed. Raiders fell, convoys reached safety, colonies held their ground. The fleet saw results, but Lyra saw only a shadow behind her. She hated that he was proving himself. She hated that his calm strength left her with no reason to push him away. She hated most of all that part of her heart, hidden deep within, began to question if she had judged him too quickly. But she smothered that thought each time it rose. To accept Marek felt like betraying Oron. To respect him felt like letting go of the bond she had lost. So she built walls inside her heart, walls higher than the stars, and behind them she buried her grief and her pride. The Silver Wing flew on, its guns sharp, its pilot fierce, and its gunners silent. Together they saved lives, but their bond remained frozen. To the outside, they looked strong. To themselves, they were only shadows of what a true team could be. The cold missions continued, one after another, and Lyra wondered how long the silence could last before something finally broke. The Silver Wing had just returned from another long patrol when the new orders came. Lyra stood in the command hall with other pilots as the fleet officer spoke. His tone was serious, his eyes heavy. A distress call has been received from a mining station on the Outer Rim. The message reports a raid in progress. Supplies and workers are under attack. We cannot ignore it. The Silver Wing will respond first. Reinforcements will follow, but you must hold the ground until then. Lyra felt her chest tighten. A mining station on the Outer Rim meant isolation, far from heavy support. It would be dangerous, but she said nothing. Orders were orders. She gave a sharp nod and turned away. Marek followed silently as always, helmet under his arm, steps steady. In the hangar, the Silver Wing waited, its hull patched from the last fight but still strong. Lyra climbed into the pilot's chair and ran her hands over the controls. Marek settled behind her without a word. The engines roared to life, and the fighter lifted from the deck, gliding into the blackness of space. The journey to the rim was long. Stars stretched out like endless rivers of light. Lyra's eyes stayed sharp, scanning the path ahead. Marek checked the weapons, his voice quiet as he reported, "All systems ready." She did not answer. Her focus stayed on the mission. Inside, though, her thoughts turned restless. Every distress call carried risk. Too many times she had seen raiders use them as bait. But she kept the thought buried, unwilling to speak it aloud. When the Silver Wing dropped from warp near the mining station, the first thing they saw was smoke. The station floated against the backdrop of stars, its metal sides scorched, its lights flickering. A faint distress beacon pulsed from the control tower, calling for help. Reading no large ships nearby, Marek reported, eyes on the scanner. Only faint signals. Could be damaged equipment. Lyra narrowed her eyes. Or could be raiders hiding. She brought the fighter closer, circling the station. At first, all seemed quiet. Too quiet. Then, from the shadow of the asteroid belt, ships appeared. Dark, fast, and sharp, their engines flared as they rushed forward. Raiders, more than a dozen, armed and ready. It's an ambush, Lyra hissed, pulling the fighter into a sharp climb. The raiders opened fire at once. Bright blasts lit the void, striking across the Silver Wing's shields. The cockpit shook with the impact. Lyra gritted her teeth, forcing the ship into a spin. Marek's hands moved fast, locking targets and firing. His shots struck true, tearing down the first wave. But for every ship destroyed, more swarmed in. The trap had been well planned. The Silver Wing fought hard, weaving between the enemy lines. Lyra flew with unmatched skill, her reflexes sharp as she dodged fire and turned the fighter into the narrow gaps between ships. Marek's weapons roared, striking enemy after enemy. Yet the raiders did not retreat. They pressed closer, their numbers overwhelming. Alarms screamed in the cockpit. Shields dropped lower with every hit. The fighter shuddered as blasts scorched the hull. Sparks flew from the panels, the air thick with the smell of burning circuits. Shields at 30%, Marek said calmly, though his voice carried weight now. Hold them, Lyra snapped, pulling the fighter into a dive. Below, the mining station spun in silence. The beacon pulsed faintly, but no sign of workers or defenders appeared. Lyra's stomach twisted as the truth sank deeper. There had never been an attack here. The distress call was false. It had been designed to lure them in, to trap them far from help. The raiders tightened their circle. Fire blasted from all sides. Lyra's hands flew over the controls, pushing the ship harder, faster. Marek fired back with precision, striking weak points, keeping them alive for another breath. But the numbers were against them. Another strike rocked the fighter. Warning lights flashed red. The engines groaned, shields nearly gone. Lyra bit back her fear, forcing herself to stay cold. She had faced death before. She could face it again. But this time, she was not alone. This time, Marek's voice was steady behind her, calm even as the walls shook. Focus on the left flank, he said quickly. There's a gap. Break through before they close it. Lyra hesitated. She hated listening to him, hated the thought of needing his guidance. But one glance at the scanner showed he was right. The raiders had overextended their line, leaving a thin opening. If they moved now, they might break free. With a sharp breath, she swung the fighter left. The Silver Wing shot forward, engines straining. Marek's guns blazed, cutting down the ships blocking their path. Explosions lit the darkness as they broke through the circle, slipping past before the raiders could close it. For a moment, the stars opened wide again. Freedom lay ahead. But the raiders were not finished. Several ships sped after them, firing relentlessly. The fighter shook, alarms blaring once more. Engines overheating, Marek warned. Lyra pushed them harder. We just need distance until reinforcements arrive. The Silver Wing darted through the asteroid belt, weaving between massive rocks as enemy fire followed close behind. Lyra's focus sharpened, her hands precise, every movement a test of skill. Marek's guns struck the pursuers one by one, but still they pressed on. A blast struck the rear of the ship, tearing through weakened shields. The cockpit filled with smoke, sparks bursting across the controls. Lyra coughed, struggling to see, her hands fighting to keep the fighter steady. "Marek," she called, her voice rough. "I'm here," he answered firmly. His voice cut through the chaos like steel. "Keep flying. I'll cover us." His words steadied her more than she wanted to admit. She pulled the fighter through the narrow gaps of the asteroids, trusting his guns to hold back the enemy. Explosions flared behind them as Marek's shots found their marks. Minutes felt like hours. At last, the scanner beeped with new signals. Reinforcements had arrived. Union warships dropped from warp, their cannons blazing. The raiders scattered, fleeing back into the shadows. The trap had failed, though the cost had been heavy. The Silver Wing, scarred and smoking, limped back to the fleet. Lyra guided the fighter onto the deck, the landing rough but safe. The hangar crews rushed to meet them, pulling open panels and spraying fire foam over smoking wires. Lyra sat in the pilot's chair, her chest rising and falling fast. She glanced back at Marek, who was calmly unstrapping, his armor scorched but his eyes steady. For the first time, she felt a flicker of something she did not expect. Not trust, not yet, but a small spark of respect. He had not wavered in the trap. He had not faltered when the enemy pressed close. He had stood firm, even when she wanted to carry the fight alone. Still, she said nothing. She climbed out of the cockpit, silent as ever. Marek followed, just as quiet. The mission was over, but its shadow remained. The raiders had set the trap well. They had nearly won. But the Silver Wing had survived. And though Lyra did not admit it aloud, she knew one reason why. The Silver Wing came out of repairs slower than usual. Its hull had been burned by enemy fire, its engines strained nearly to breaking, and the weapons had overheated during the ambush at the mining station. Lyra walked through the hangar every day to watch the crews fix it. To others it was just a ship, but to her it was home, the one place where she still felt a connection to Oran. She pretended not to notice Marek waiting nearby, helping with small tasks or studying the ship's systems. He never forced his presence on her. He was quiet, steady, and always within reach. That made it harder for her to hate him, though she tried to hold on to her anger. When the Silver Wing was ready, the orders came again. Another patrol. Another risk. This time, the mission carried them deeper into the rim where raiders had been gathering. The fleet had grown worried about an attack against a Union relay station. If the raiders cut it, communication across the sector would fall silent. The Silver Wing entered warp, carrying only Lyra and Marek. The stars stretched into rivers of light, and silence filled the cockpit as usual. Lyra stared forward, her hands resting on the controls. Marek checked the guns and spoke only to confirm, "Weapons ready." When they dropped from warp, the relay station appeared in the distance, its towers standing tall above a small barren moon. At first, all looked calm. No enemy ships waited nearby. But as they closed in, the scanner lit up with signals. Raiders poured from the shadows of the moon, more ships than they had ever faced before. Lyra's stomach tightened. They knew we would come. The raiders formed a wide circle, cutting off escape. Fire lit up the void, streaking toward them from every side. Lyra pulled the fighter into a sharp dive, dodging the first volley. Marek's guns roared, striking back with steady fire, but the odds were heavy. The relay station called for help, its signal desperate. Reinforcements were already on the way, but the enemy would destroy the station before they arrived. The Silver Wing had to hold the line. Lyra's hands flew across the controls, guiding the fighter through the storm of fire. She weaved between enemy ships, engines screaming as she pushed them to their limit. Marek's shots cut down raiders one by one, precise and calm, but the numbers did not shrink fast enough. Another blast struck the fighter. The cockpit shook, alarms blared, and warning lights flashed red. Smoke filled the air, stinging Lyra's eyes. She gritted her teeth and forced the ship steady. "Shields failing," Marek reported. His tone remained steady, though the situation grew worse with each second. Lyra's heart pounded. She felt the same fear that had filled her the day Oran was lost. She had sworn never to feel it again, but here it was, clawing at her chest. For a moment, doubt threatened to take her. Could she fight through this alone? Could she carry another partner to his death? Her hands trembled. The ship lurched as more blasts struck the hull. Then Marek's voice cut through the noise, firm and unshaken. "I will hold them. You fly. Do not think of anything else." The words steadied her. She drew a deep breath and forced her focus back on the battle. She could fly. That was what she knew best. She turned the Silver Wing into a sharp roll, diving between two raiders and pulling up hard to dodge a missile. Marek's guns followed, blasting the missile apart before it struck them. The enemy pressed closer, circling like hunters. Lyra swung the fighter near the relay station, using its towers as cover. Marek fired across the gaps, striking down ships that tried to slip through. Explosions lit the void, burning bright against the moon's surface. But the raiders did not break. More ships poured in, desperate to destroy the station before reinforcements arrived. Another blast ripped across the hull, shaking the cockpit so hard that Lyra's vision blurred. A panel burst with sparks beside her seat. She hissed in pain but kept her grip on the controls. Marek leaned forward, his voice sharp now but not panicked. "They want the station. Keep it between us and them. Use it as a shield." Lyra obeyed without arguing. She pulled the Silver Wing into a tight loop around the relay towers, forcing the raiders to chase them. Each time the enemy tried to fire, they risked striking the very station they sought to destroy. The strategy slowed their attack, giving Marek clear shots to strike them down. Minutes dragged like hours. Lyra's arms ached, her eyes burned, and the fighter groaned under the strain. But she kept flying, sharper and faster than ever before. Marek's fire never stopped, his aim relentless. Together they held the line, standing against wave after wave of raiders. At last, the scanner beeped with new signals. Reinforcements. Union warships dropped from warp, their cannons blazing. The raiders, broken and scattered, began to flee into the shadows. The trap had failed again, and the relay station stood unharmed. The Silver Wing drifted near the station, smoke trailing from its engines, hull scorched and weapons drained. Lyra's chest heaved with exhaustion, but her hands remained steady on the controls. Silence filled the cockpit for a long moment. Then she turned her head slightly, just enough to glance back at Marek. His armor was scarred, his face covered with sweat, but his eyes were calm. He met her gaze without speaking, waiting for her to say something first. Lyra swallowed hard. For the first time since Oren's death, she felt something shift inside her. She had always believed humans were weak, unworthy of standing beside her. But Marek had proven her wrong. In the middle of fire and fear, he had not bent, he had not broken, and he had not left her side. Her voice came out quiet, almost uncertain. You held the line. Marek gave a small nod. We both did. Those simple words struck her harder than she expected. He did not take the credit. He did not demand thanks. He only reminded her of the truth. They had stood together, and together they had survived. As the Union fleet secured the area, Lyra guided the Silver Wing back to the warship. She still carried the shadow of her loss, but for the first time, she felt that shadow begin to lift, even if only a little. Marek had shown her something she had not wanted to see. He was not a replacement for Oran. He was something else. A partner in his own right. The Silver Wing was carried back to the Union fleet for repairs. Its hull was marked with deep scars, its wings dented, and its engines weak from strain. When the ship rested inside the hangar, engineers rushed to examine it, surprised that it had even survived the fight. Lyra stepped down first, her uniform burned at the edges, her body tired but still standing. Marek followed, carrying his weapon at his side, silent as always. The crew gathered to see them. Whispers moved quickly through the hangar. Everyone knew the odds they had faced, and everyone knew the station would have been destroyed if the Silver Wing had not held the line. But Marek did not stand tall to take praise, and Lyra did not raise her voice to boast. They walked past the others in silence, leaving behind the sound of murmurs and claps on the back. Later, inside the quiet of the medical bay, Lyra sat on the edge of a bed while a medic checked the burn on her shoulder. She kept her eyes lowered, her thoughts tangled. The medic spoke softly, telling her the wound was not deep and would heal soon. When the treatment ended, she rose and stepped out, expecting to find Marek gone. Instead, she found him sitting outside the bay, waiting. His armor had been removed, revealing a simple grey uniform marked with stains of battle. His arm was wrapped with fresh bandages, but he did not seem bothered by it. He only gave a small nod when he saw her. "You should rest," she said quietly. "I will," Marek replied. "After you." She almost argued but stopped herself. Something in his calm eyes made her pause. For weeks she had pushed him away, but now she could not deny what she had seen in the battle. He had stood unshaken when everything burned around them. He had fought with the patience of a man who would not leave until the fight was truly done. That night, Lyra could not sleep. The hum of the ship was steady, yet her thoughts kept circling. She remembered Oren's laughter, his sharp voice during missions, and the way his presence had filled every space. Then she remembered Marek, standing in silence, shielding her, speaking only when his words carried weight. They were different, yet both had been there for her in their own ways. The next day, orders came for another patrol. The Silver Wing would not fly for weeks, so they were placed on a larger cruiser to assist with scouting duties. Lyra felt a strange mix of relief and unease. She no longer doubted Marek's skill, but trust was not something she gave easily. During the patrol, they were sent to scan a field of broken asteroids. Small signals flickered across the scanners, signs of hidden raider probes. Lyra and Marek moved through the narrow passages of rock in a small shuttle, each turned sharp and dangerous. At one point, the shuttle scraped against stone, shaking the cockpit. Lyra cursed under her breath, worried the hull might split. Marek leaned forward, steady as always, his voice calm. "Pull left. There is space there. Do not rush." She listened without thought this time, adjusting the shuttle exactly as he said. The path opened, smooth and safe. It was a small thing, yet it carried weight. She had trusted him, even for a moment, and it had worked. Hours passed as they scanned, and silence grew heavy again. But this silence felt different. It no longer carried tension or anger. It was the silence of two people working side by side, comfortable enough to let actions speak louder than words. When they returned to the cruiser, the captain called them forward. He praised the way they had fought at the relay station and told them the Union fleet would need more crews like them. Lyra almost felt embarrassed. She was not used to being spoken of with a partner after Oren's death. She glanced at Merak, half expecting him to look proud. But he only stood still, his expression calm. Later, in the quiet of the mess hall, Lyra finally spoke to him directly. Her voice was softer than usual. "You did not take credit back there. You did not even speak." Merak lifted his eyes to her. "Credit does not matter. Survival does. You fly, I protect. That is enough." For the first time, Lyra let out a small laugh, though it carried sadness. "Oran used to say something like that. He told me once, 'We do not fight for medals, we fight so we can see another day.'" Merak gave the smallest of smiles, almost hidden. Then he was wise. Silence followed, but it was not empty. It was filled with a quiet bond forming, one that neither of them forced but both accepted. Lyra felt something she had not felt in a long time, a weight lifting from her chest. Days passed, and the trust grew with each mission. When Merak spoke, she listened. When she gave orders, he followed without question, yet never blindly. He gave advice when needed, and his advice often saved them from mistakes. They began to move as one, their actions timed without needing words. One evening, after a long mission, Lyra stood at the observation deck, staring at the stars. The endless dark stretched before her, filled with both danger and wonder. She heard steps and knew without looking that Merak had joined her. "You always stand here after a mission," he said quietly. "It reminds me that there is more than war," she replied. "The stars are quiet, even when we are not." Merak stood beside her, hands behind his back. "Then keep looking at them. I will stand guard." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that touched her deeply. She realized then that trust was not something built in a single battle. It was forged in moments like this, quiet and steady, until it became unshakable. For the first time, Lyra turned to him with honest words. "I misjudged you. I thought you were weak because you were human. I was wrong." Merak met her eyes, his voice steady. "You lost someone you trusted. It is not easy to open that place again." Her chest tightened, and she looked away at the stars. "But I am opening it now." Merak said nothing more. He did not need to. The silence between them spoke louder than words. That night, when she returned to her quarters, Lyra felt a calm she had not known since Oren's loss. Merak was not a replacement. He was himself. Strong, quiet, and steadfast. The trust between them had been forged not by force but by fire, patience, and time. The Union fleet moved across the stars like a river of light. Each ship had its purpose, each crew carried their own story. Among them, the cruiser Dawn Chaser prepared for another patrol along the border. Lyra and Merak had been assigned together once more. It was no longer strange to see their names side by side on the mission list. The crew had stopped whispering about them. Instead, they spoke with respect, saying that the alien pilot and the human soldier had become one of the strongest pairs in the fleet. Lyra walked through the hangar with steady steps. Her uniform was clean, her wounds healed, but her mind carried all the battles they had survived. She felt lighter than before, yet more grounded. Merak walked beside her, his expression calm as always, but his presence carried weight. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was the silence of trust, built from fire and tempered by time. Their mission was to scout a sector close to Raider space. Many patrols had gone missing there, and command feared a hidden base was growing. Lyra felt the familiar rise of tension as they prepared their shuttle, but this time she did not carry it alone. Marek was with her, and that fact gave her strength. As the shuttle left the hangar, stars stretched into endless black around them. The journey was quiet at first. The scanners picked up nothing but drifting stones and cold light. Lyra kept her hands on the controls, while Marek studied the readings beside her. He broke the silence first. "You fly with less anger now," he said softly. Lyra gave a small smile. "And you speak more than you used to." Marek allowed a faint hint of amusement to show. "Perhaps I learned from you." She shook her head. "No, I learned from you." Their words carried no tension. Instead, they carried warmth, a sign of a bond that had grown strong. Hours passed before the scanners blinked with a warning. A cluster of signals pulsed from behind a large asteroid field. Lyra narrowed her eyes and adjusted the shuttle. Marek leaned closer to the screen. "It is no ordinary patrol. These numbers suggest a fleet," he said. The asteroid field loomed ahead, jagged rocks twisting like broken teeth. Hiding behind them, several Raider ships powered their engines. If they attacked the Union lines with such numbers, many lives would be lost. Lyra knew they could not fight them alone. She also knew they could not leave without proof. Marek read her thoughts and spoke before she could. "We need to get closer. If we record their strength, the fleet will be ready." She gave a firm nod. "Hold steady. This will not be easy." The shuttle slid between the massive rocks, engines quiet and controlled. Every turn carried risk. A single mistake would smash them against stone. But Lyra flew with skill, her hands guided by years of training, her nerves steadied by Marek's calm presence. As they reached the far side of the field, the Raider fleet came into view. Rows of dark ships floated like predators waiting for prey. Lyra felt her chest tighten at the sight. She had seen many fleets, but this one was large enough to burn entire colonies. Marek activated the recorder, his voice steady. "We have what we need. Now we must leave without notice." But luck did not stay with them. One of the Raider scouts detected their shuttle. Sirens rang out, and enemy ships turned toward them. Lyra gripped the controls and pushed the engines to full power. The shuttle shook as it darted back into the asteroid field. The chase began. Raiders fired beams that lit the rocks around them. Explosions echoed through the dark as stones shattered into dust. Lyra twisted the shuttle sharply, weaving through gaps no larger than a house. Marek fired back with the turret, each shot aimed to slow their pursuers. "Left," he called. She turned left. "Up, now down." She followed each word, their movements flowing together. It was as if they shared one mind, one purpose. The bond that had been forged in battle now guided them through chaos. At last, they cleared the final rocks and shot into open space. The Raider ships fell behind, unwilling to risk following too far. Lyra sent the message to the fleet with the recorded proof. Relief spread across her chest as the signal confirmed. When the shuttle docked back with the Dawn Chaser, the hangar burst into motion. Officers rushed to receive the data, and the captain himself stepped forward to meet them. He praised their courage, telling them the fleet now had the knowledge to stop the Raider threat. Their mission had saved countless lives. But for Lyra, the true victory was not in the words of the captain. It was in the steady look Marek gave her, the unspoken truth that they had faced death together and returned stronger. That night, Lyra stood once more at the observation deck. The stars stretched before her, endless and silent. She thought of Oron, of the battles they had shared, and of the pain of losing him. She would never forget him. His memory would remain part of her always. But as she looked at Marek standing beside her, she felt something new. She turned to him, her voice calm but filled with meaning. I once thought no one could replace what I lost. I see now that you were never meant to replace anyone. You are yourself, and you are my partner. Marek met her gaze, his words simple but strong. And you are mine. For a long time, they stood together, watching the stars. No more distance, no more doubt. Only a bond forged by trust, battle, and respect. The galaxy was still dangerous, the war was far from over, but they would face it side by side. Lyra no longer felt the weight of walking alone. She had found strength again, not by holding on to the past, but by opening her heart to the present. The human she once doubted had become the one she trusted most.